Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Hulk Martin.
And I am Mr. Olympia, 1989, Patrick Guerra. You see these guns, Damon? Are you seeing what's going on here? The 22-inch pythons, brother.
Did you get your tickets to the gun show?
Shit.
Tonight, yes, we are reviewing the new film. Now, before we get to anything else, let me just be clear about this. Love Lies Bleeding definitely teeters on the line of not actually being horror, but a lot of horror websites have reviewed it. It's by Rose Glass, which was very famously, she did Saint Maud, which we did review, was one of your favorite films of the year. I enjoyed it, but it was one of your absolute favorite films of the year.
Totally.
And I said, you know what? I'm all about inclusivity, and we are going to have a lot of horror films coming up in the next 2 months. I sat, when I saw the film in the theater literally hours ago, there was trailers for The First Omen, which actually weirdly looks kind of good. I'm kind of excited.
It does. I'm interested.
Immaculate comes out. That's going to be one of our next films. Of course, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which that even kind of teeters on horror. I mean, you could argue that's not, but it's Ghost. So, okay, yeah. You got Late Night with the Devil, which is David Dastmalchian's film. So we got a lot of horror films coming up relatively soon. So we kind of decided to step out of bounds a little bit this week and talk about the new film from A24 by Rose Glass, Love Lies Bleeding.
Ooh, Damon, Love Lies Bleeding indeed. Released, of course, in March of 2024. Starring Kristen Stewart as Lou, Katie O'Brien as Jackie, and let's not forget Ed Harris as Lou Sr., Dave Franco as JJ, Jenna Malone as the sister Beth. I mean, the cast goes on and on and on with heavy hitters. Directed, of course, as you mentioned, by Rose Glass, who directed the incredible Saint Maud, and written by Rose Glass and Veronica Tafilska. Damon, listen, you're right. Is Love Lies Bleeding truly horror? No, but you know what it is? It's a thriller, and thriller, I think we all agree on, is a subset of horror. You can't ignore it alongside horror. It's just a different type of horror. By the way, what does it do? It's right there in the title. It thrills. And I do believe that we're going to talk a lot about what thrillers need to be. And I do believe, Damon, Love Lies Bleeding is a thriller and a half. It's a thriller and much more.
Yeah, it's a very gritty thriller, and it definitely qualifies as that. And listen, there are plenty of films that I see classified as horror on Netflix and Shudder and other services, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know if I'd really call this horror. When we've gone on deep dives where we've been kind of in lulls between films coming out, I'll do deep dives on other services just trying to find us something cool to review. And I watched a lot of films on Shudder, and they're not necessarily bad films, but I'm like, this isn't really horror. Like, it's kind of odd.
Right.
This is so. I'm all about inclusivity, so in this particular case, this, again, teeters the line. Rose Glass was best known for a horror film, and I think this is going to draw in a lot of horror fans. And when it first debuted at Sundance, there was a lot of horror sites reviewing it that were there. So, again, is this straight-up horror? If you are looking for a straight-up horror film to go to the theater this weekend and see, Love Lies Bleeding is probably not it. I'll just tell you that ahead of time. But it is a very gritty, it is a very bloody thriller. And, I would argue, while thrillers, again, kind of teeter that line between just being a psychological thriller and a horror film, there's a lot of those. I mean, again, that's the argument people always made about Silence of the Lambs. Oh, it's not a horror film, it's a psychological thriller. I'm like, it's a horror film. It's also a psychological thriller, but it's also a horror film. When you start teetering into murder, serial killers, things like that, like, I get it. You're trying to, you don't want that label necessarily. But I would say, Love Lies Bleeding doesn't necessarily fall into that category, but it does fall into the thriller category, hardcore thriller category. It is very gritty, very, very pulp, very bloody. And yeah, so we're going to review it.
There's a lot of pulp in this movie, as in being beaten to a bloody pulp. There's a lot of bloody noses. There's a lot of skin. There's a lot of intensity. This is really, and by the way, Damon, one of our classic and most foundational ingredients for any good horror. There's plenty of dread. I think I think this does. Why this makes a difference is that you have Rose Glass at the helm. Rose Glass started her career, and I don't think Rose even wanted to necessarily pigeonhole herself into horror, but she started in horror with a very strong outing. I mean, Saint Maud is a very strong movie. You don't even have to love it to know how well it's made, how well directed it is, how clearly visionary it is. Like, there's a lot of great horror movies, and then there are ones that stand out as being something special. And I think Saint Maud is in that category for me. So when Rose Glass decides that her next thing is going to be a bodybuilding thriller with Kristen Stewart, I went, yeah, of course I'm going to watch this. I don't care what she does next. It doesn't really matter what she does next. A lot of great directors got their start in horror. Steven Spielberg, Gore Verbinski. Who else, Damon? There's Richard Donner with The Omen. I mean, these people get their start in horror because they know that they can mold stories into something really terrifying and really heightened. And I think that's what sets this movie apart, is that Rose Glass made a thriller that is so heightened that it borders on pure genre. It borders on something that is beyond just your standard, we're going to get guns and we're going to shoot at people. It's something much more beyond that. There's a lot of horrific elements in this movie, a lot of them psychological, Damon. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you fancy yourself a bit of a psychological thriller buff, don't you?
I do, and that's one of my favorite genres of films. I love psychological thrillers. And so, listen, Rose Glass had me as an audience member as soon as I heard this was coming out, just because the premise sounded so interesting. I am a big Kristen Stewart fan, so I was like, okay, you got me. I'm in. Like, I'm ready. Then I saw the first trailer, and I was like, okay, this is now one of my most anticipated films of 2024. The trailer hooked me right away. And I got to say, the movie didn't let me down. I mean, just to kind of not to, belabor the point and get into our full review, it paid off. The film paid off. It is exactly what I wanted it to be. Now, I will say, and this is something we go back to all the time, trailers can lead you down the wrong path. And sometimes, like we talked about this with, what was the really bad horror film from last year? It's a Wonderful Knife.
That is going to be our punching bag for quite some time.
The trailer for that film and then what actually happened in the movie were just so diametrically opposed to each other as what that film ended up being. And to a smaller extent, and we just said the marketing was really wrong, but even the recent film Imaginary was just marketed wrong. The trailer the trailer and the promotion should have been done differently. Love Lies Bleeding, there's one slight narrative that's different from what the trailer sets it up to be, but it doesn't ruin the film in any way, shape, or form. I actually, in a weird way, kind of enjoyed it because, much like yourself, I feel like trailers just give away so much these days that you feel like you've seen the movie by the time you walk in there. And so Love Lies Bleeding subverted some expectations, but the premise of the story is pretty simple. Lou, who is our lead character, Kristen Stewart, is a gym manager in a gritty, just southwest town in New Mexico. Very much does not like her job, does not like her life. She's just kind of like rolling with the punches and doing the day-to-day. We literally opened with a scene of her cleaning out a nasty toilet.
Oh.
This is just her life. This is what she does. Her father is a local crime boss who runs a gun range, who also does some other nefarious activities that we won't necessarily get into. And then out of nowhere rolls through town this woman named Jackie. She is a female bodybuilder, and she is basically hitchhiking her way from Oklahoma to eventually get to Las Vegas, where there's going to be a bodybuilding competition that she plans on entering and hopefully winning. She arrived in this small little one-horse town in New Mexico just because that's where she kind of got left. She's looking for a job just to kind of hold up for a few weeks so she can get strong, get buff, get ready for this competition, and then move on to Vegas. And that's where she crosses paths with Lou, who is the local gym manager. And right away, Lou is taken with Jackie. She is just absolutely gobsmacked by Jackie. And that connection, that spark flies immediately. But like any great crime thriller, like any great psychological thriller, that spark can sometimes cause a fire, and then the fire can cause a meltdown. And that's kind of what happens in Love Lies Bleeding.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's a really great... it's got a lot of twists and turns, I would say. And but without ever... oh, man, this is so weird. And it's hard to get into, pre-spoilers. But Rose knows how to balance the line between reality and I would say surrealism. She doesn't overuse the surrealism. I think we could say that maybe Alex Garland is kind of guilty of that. Alex Garland being the director of one of your favorite movies, Damon, Men. Um, I have to do this quick little digression. So, somebody today, because the trailers for Civil War are coming out, and Civil War is Alex Garland's latest movie, and this guy on Twitter said, I was sitting in the theater watching Men, and he had me, and all the way up until the last 10 minutes. And in those last 10 minutes, I said to myself, this motherfucker is never going to hustle me again. Like, and I thought of you in that point because you were livid about the ending. I was too, by the way. The ending of Men was kind of over the top, even in a weird surrealistic movie. It was over the top. Somehow Rose Glass knows how to sprinkle surrealism in, and I think what's really amazing about what she could do with it, and she did it in Saint Maud as well, is that there is emotional and story beats inside of that surrealism. It is surreal. It is are there, and you get little glimpses of it in the trailers if you watch carefully. You look at something and you go, well, I know that can't actually happen. So what the hell is that I'm looking at? Rose sprinkles it into the story, but it has emotional and thematic resonance. And I know those are fucking $5 words, Damon, but truth be told, those $5 words, they count and make it something special. It doesn't feel empty in the end. You don't sit there in the end going, and I quote, what the fuck was that? Which is the guy that in my theater at the end of Men, completely confused. This movie, while it does dip into the surreal, while it does dip into things that cannot happen, it's still very much anchored in reality. It's very much anchored in real emotions. It's very much anchored in real stakes. You know that these characters are in trouble in real ways. And I said earlier, this thing is laced in dread. You don't get the impression that anyone ever feels comfortable in this movie. Everyone is always looking over their shoulder for whatever reason they have. Jackie has her reasons for looking over her shoulder. Lou has her reasons for looking over his shoulder. Lou Sr., her dad, has his reasons for looking over his shoulder. There's corrupt cops. There's slime balls. There's victims. Everybody in this movie, it really takes me back to my childhood, Damon. I'll go ahead and lay out on the couch, and you can start your pen and pad and start writing or having our psychiatry session. Where I grew up, and I know you grew up in low income as well, it seemed like day to day, a lot of people were almost always miserable. Miserable was almost the control. And it was only when things got really bad or kind of good that things changed. But otherwise, the steady state was misery. And I felt that all over this movie. Misery, paranoia, and just, I don't know, I would say unrealistic hope or almost delusion, I would say. In fact, I think delusion's a huge theme in here.
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, I would absolutely agree with you saying that misery is the control in this film. Like it is the balance. And for me, when I was growing up, the highs were, and I'm not kidding when I say this, I'm not ashamed to say this, was when the beginning of the month would come, we get like food stamps. We get our food stamps. We were that poor. Like that's how poor I was growing up. And you knew when the food stamps came, you could get food. And so like that was a trip to the grocery store. It's like the most exciting time of the month. Then by the end of the month, you're back to the lower level of misery again because you have nothing left. Also, just to point out for surrealism, I want to point this out because it feels like I'd imagine anyone who's listened to this podcast for any amount of time realizes, as we always say on here, you're the art house goon. I'm not the art house goon.
Oh, we're going to change that.
We just had this conversation going back to stop motion where I said, like, sometimes I feel like these films that are so arty and so just drenched in interpretation that I feel like it's a party that I'm not being invited to, and when I leave a theater, I either feel dumb that I didn't understand it, or I have to have like a professor's lesson afterwards to like teach me about what it was supposed to be about. Sometimes I like to just go to a movie and just veg out and enjoy a movie. while they do dabble in surrealism in Love Lies Bleeding, I would argue this is a much more straightforward movie than even Saint Maud was. Like Saint Maud
Yeah.
went a lot of different directions. This is much more straightforward. So just to kind of put out there for the audience that hasn't seen it yet, yes, the surrealism in this movie actually serves a real purpose and you understand what's happening. There was never a moment in this movie where I was like, huh? Or why are they doing this? Or what does this mean? It was much more straightforward. So I think this is kind of like a film that serves all masters in a weird way. Like it serves the art house master because you're going to appreciate the surrealism, you're going to appreciate the messages in the surrealism that happen, and then the guy like me who wants something a little bit more straightforward, who doesn't want to feel like I need to go read a book when I go home to understand what I just watched. I didn't need that. I totally understood what was happening here. So I think that's a line and a balance that Rose Glass finds in this film pretty brilliantly, which I really enjoy. Getting back to what you're saying about the actual theme of the film with the people in the film, yeah, I mean, this is a small town in the Southwest in the late 1980s. I believe it takes place in 1989, right when the Berlin Wall's coming down and all that kind of stuff. But none of that matters to this town. These people are just like grimy. Like this is the kind of town. It's like a Dust Bowl town. Like have you ever seen movies or TV shows about the Dust Bowl back in the 1920s, whatever it was, like Oklahoma? Like the default setting for those people was dirty, just because there was so much like gunk flying through the air, like you could not stay clean. That's kind of what you feel like here. Like everything is grimy and gritty and sweaty and gross, and no one seems particularly happy. Even Lou Sr., who runs the gun range, has his own like little criminal empire in this town. He seems pretty miserable. Like I don't think we see him smile one time in this entire movie. He just never seems happy. And that's the guy who has kind of like the power. Like he has the money, the power, like he has control over his own situation. Even he's miserable. So that when you have that default setting in a film, and then when Jackie or when Lou meets Jackie, that's the spike. That's the food stamp showing up at the beginning of the month. She finds somebody who enthralls her, who intrigues her, somebody who doesn't look or act like everyone else around her. And she says very openly when she meets Jackie, I've never left this town. So Jackie is like a foreign object being thrown into her world. She's like an alien being thrown into this place. And Lou is drawn to her immediately, but Lou's also scared because she finds out, and again, this is in the trailer, so we're not spoiling anything here, finds out that Jackie came to town and immediately got a job working for Lou Sr. She is estranged from her father. She wants nothing to do with him. She wants nothing to do with his criminal empire. She's basically just does not want to have any contact. And at some point early on, she finds out that Jackie is working for Lou Sr. So that throws in a whole other mess of problems for Jackie and for Lou as they start building this relationship with each other.
It does, Damon. Before we get into spoilers, because I think I'm kind of tongue-tied on what I want to say, because I think I have a few particular topics that I'd like to touch on, and for our very patient listeners who are like, when are you going to get to the horror shit? It might need a little bit of the spoiler, so I'm going to hold off on that. So something came up, and we shared about this last night, but I just wanted to address it before we get into spoilers. Is that yes, Damon, this is indeed a sexy movie. Any good late 80s, early 90s movie is kind of sexy. He's got some sex in it and all that stuff. And some people like that and some people don't. And that's okay, whatever your prerogative is. But it is one of those movies. It is something. We talked about Suitable Flesh recently. Suitable Flesh is 100% an erotic thriller. This movie is indeed an erotic thriller on top of its psychological elements and its horror elements. And so, somewhere in Detroit last night, somebody got a little overzealous, might have snuck in a couple of bottles of Fireball, maybe a line of Coke or two, and decided to, have their way with themselves during the movie. Okay. And
he was not the master of his domain, to put it in Seinfeld terms.
He was not. But it sparked a bigger conversation that I wanted to kind of touch on real quick before we move on to anything, because it's not truly related to the movie, but I figured we could talk about it really quick, because you and I always tout the theater experience. We always do. Because of that incident, it spiked the whole other side of this discussion, which is there are people out there who go, this is why I hate going to the movies. And I wanted your take on it, Damon, because I live in a big city. You live in a big enough city. You know, you don't live in a small town. You live in Columbus, Ohio. That's a decent sized town where a lot of stuff goes on down there. And I live in San Diego. It's a pretty big town, 2 million people in the city. I go to a major theater chain. You've been to it with me. It ain't the nicest place in the world. You know, it's not. But I like my experience in the movie theaters. I don't think I've ever been in a movie theater where somebody pulled it out. I mean, and I guess my point to bring all this up, Damon, is like I don't want an incident like what happened last night to be like, yeah, that's what the movies are like, but you should go anyway. Because in my experience, in my purely anecdotal experience, Damon, I've only ever had joy and fun at the movie theaters. It's only ever been a great experience with a couple of very random exceptions over the many years. I've been going since I'm a child. That's a lot of years. And I'm curious your take on the movie going experience, because we always encourage on this show, if you can go see something in the theater, go see it in the theater. I know you're going to say that about Love Lies Bleeding. That's how I feel about Love Lies Bleeding. The fact that there aren't 20 stories of guys enjoying themselves at Love Lies Bleeding is testament to that. There was one story. What say you, Damon? Is the theater experience where you're at completely miserable and people should just stay home?
First off, let me defend my town. You said I live in kind of a big city. Columbus is bigger than Boston, buddy. Okay, we have like 2 million more people.
Boston's small.
We are a big city. Just to put it out there, just say Columbus is not a small city. We are a big city. I love the theater experience. Have I had bad experiences at the theater? Absolutely. I've had experiences going back to Seinfeld, the episode where George takes a woman and there's these guys making noise and kicking the seats behind him and he gets up and yells at him. I've had instances where I've literally stood up and threatened to go behind me and beat the shit out of someone making noise. I've had that experience. Now it's rare, but I've had that experience. I've had the experience where people are just being loud and obnoxious in movies, and I can't enjoy the film because like when you watch those reaction videos online, like a great example is Avengers Endgame, when all the heroes come back. Sorry, the movie's like 5 years old at this point. I'm not, we're a horror movie podcast. Sorry, but I'm spoiling Avengers Endgame. All the heroes come back. You know the reaction videos I'm talking about on TikTok and some people, the whole crowd goes nuts. I like watching those. It's fun to reminisce of like how cool that moment was. But when I'm in the theater, I kind of want silence. Like I kind of want quiet. I want to see and hear everything. And there were a couple, like I went to a special screening of Dune Part 2, which the theater was packed, an IMAX theater. It was packed. I hate sitting next to people I don't know in the theater. I had people on both sides of me I didn't know. And there were a couple ooh and ah moments, and I'm like, but it didn't get bad, didn't get crazy, people didn't lose their minds. But by and large, every theater experience I have is positive. I enjoy it. I love it. I love the interaction, and there are some, like when I go see a horror movie, like there are some funny moments too with the audience that interacts.
Oh yeah.
Some people will be like, "Don't go in there," and everyone kind of laughs, and like whatever. As long as it doesn't get obnoxious, And again, I've had a couple of experiences, but you have to understand. Much like you, I've been going to the theater since I was a kid, and I would say on any given year, there's 52 weeks in the year. I would say I probably go to the movies no less than 35 times a year at minimum.
Oh, minimum.
I mean, I'm going 3 times next week, 3 times in the theater in 1 week. I go a lot. And so, I would say over 52 weeks, I see at least 35, maybe even 40 films a year because I may go twice in a week sometimes. That's a lot of time to spend in a movie theater. And I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've had a bad experience at a movie theater. Now, also want to throw this in. I used to work at a movie theater. When I was in college, right out of college, while I was still looking for a job that actually paid me for what I was skilled for, I worked and managed a movie theater and made pretty good money, but I worked great hours. Loved the experience because I love movies. It was a cool experience. I got to see everything early. I got to, in those days, because everything was still on film, you had to screen the films before the audience could see them to make sure the reels worked. So I would see everything 2 or 3 days earlier than the audience would see them, which was awesome. We had one incident while I worked there, and it wasn't even like the thing you're talking about in Michigan. It was two kids, like teenagers, were like groping in the back of the theater, and they were like, getting a little bit like in the stages of undress, let's say.
Okay.
And they got busted and they got thrown out, and that was it. They weren't like full on doing it. They were just like, groping more or less. But it got uncomfortable, and people were like, "Hey, this is not cool," and we tossed them out. That's the worst of it. And that was me working there I probably worked there for like 6 months. This is while I was waiting to find another job. And that's working 5 days a week, night shifts, everything, never really ran into. So, yeah, the theater experience is awesome. And, I would hope that everyone could find a theater they like. Like, I have a theater in my town that I discovered actually because of Terrifier 2. It was the theater in my town in Columbus that was showing Terrifier 2. So I went there, absolutely loved the experience, and now that's where I go. That's my theater in town. I actually have a theater like 5 minutes away from me, but I go 15 minutes away because it's a better theater. I love it. I love the experience. I adore it. So I always recommend everyone go to the theater if you can. It's a much better film going experience. You have so few distractions, which happens to me constantly when I try to watch a film at home. No matter how hard I try,
Oh yeah,
to shut off the world around me, and it's a sensory overload, and I love that. It's visual, it's audio, it's everything. And I will say, just to be honest, like my theater kicks your theater's ass, Patrick. I've been to your theater. My theater kicks your theater's ass.
Yeah, mine's a worn out theater. I mean, it is the biggest and most popular theater in the entire city of San Diego, and it gets a ton of usage, and it looks like it's got a lot of miles on it. It certainly does. No, you're right about that. But I think, and what's funny is you think about like Terrifier 2. Like I went and saw Terrifier 2 in a packed house. I remember going to see Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, to a packed house. These were wonderful times. These are horror movies. These are what you imagine are going to be the worst crowds. You go to a horror movie and it's almost always the best crowd. They're almost always fully engaged in what's going on. I felt like we had a great crowd last night when I went to go see it. My brother and I went to go see it. We had a solid crowd with us, people who really enjoyed it, kind of cheered the right moments and laughed at the right moments. They were fully engaged. And I feel like I get that experience with horror movies more than any other. It's usually the big kind of Marvel movies or mainstream movies where you tend to get those obnoxious crowd members. I remember one time I had a guy sit next to me go, "Hey man, you mind if I smoke?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he go, "All right, cool. Yeah, I got it. I'm on parole. So yeah, you're right, man. I'm not going to smoke." And I was like, "Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense not to smoke." So there was that shit. But again, it's a handful of times out of hundreds of times over my lifetime, over the better part of 30 years of me going to the theater. I've had nothing but a great time, Damon. So
And even today, I mentioned this before the show, I'll mention it now. There's a part at the end of Love Lies Bleeding, which is kind of funny a little bit, depending on how you look at it. There was a guy, I was in it, my theater was a smaller theater. Now, it was packed, to be fair. It was a packed theater for the first night showing, but it was a smaller theater. They didn't have it with the big auditoriums. It was a smaller theater, but it was packed. There was a guy like 2 rows behind us who just burst out laughing at one of the final scenes. Then he did it again at the very end of the movie. We'll talk about what that was, why it was kind of funny. He burst out laughing, and it was kind of obnoxious. It was loud, but he was genuinely just laughing. But we laughed with him because we're like, it was really funny, just the timing of the laugh. Yeah. And we had a chuckle with him. So yeah, like again, you can have a bad experience anywhere. I mean, I've been to a million concerts. I go to a lot of music. I go to a lot of concerts. I've had overwhelmingly of the hundreds upon hundreds of shows I've gone to, and I used to work at a music store, so I used to go to like 4 shows a week when I was working at a music store. I've had, by and large, great experiences at concerts, but there's always that handful of times where there's the mosh pit that gets out of control, the people keep bumping into you, people singing and they won't stop singing in your ear, whatever. There's always a handful of experiences.
The person recording the entire concert on their phone.
Yeah, and they're right in front of you, so you're like looking at their phone the entire time. But I went to, just to give you an example, like I went to a Bad Omens show, the band Bad Omens last year, and it was sold out. And I was down. I like to go down in towards the pits. I like to be close and I like to be standing. There were so many people bumping, and I have like a weird like social anxiety about people like touching me, like being in really crowded spaces. Like the only place I can do it really and not bother me is when I'm at San Diego Comic Con. I've just like come to accept it weirdly. Like it doesn't bother me there. But this concert was so packed that I had people like on top of me, like on top of me.
Yeah.
And there were moments of anxiety where I just wanted to rage out and be like, get me out of here and start throwing elbows. But I didn't. At the end of the day, it was a great concert. I had a great time. So you just have to be able to adapt to your surroundings there or in a movie theater. Can you have a bad experience? Of course you can. You can have a bad experience anywhere. You can go to a 5-star restaurant. You can go to a Michelin star restaurant and have a bad experience. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, if you have a favorite restaurant or a favorite place you like to go and you enjoy going there, you're going to enjoy it. Now, that's the theater. The theater is like a little 2-hour vacation for me when I go there.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what I wanted to get across was like, yes, there can be negative moments in the theater, but the theater experience is at risk currently. And I couldn't just bite my tongue and not say anything in defense of the movie theater going experience. Again, mine is anecdotal. If you live in a town where every single time you go, it's miserable, I get it. I can't tell you otherwise because that's your experience every single time you go. I go a lot. I go so much that I would definitely be like, yeah, you know what? I understand, but I'm coming to defense of the theater experience. And if you're out there and you're on the fence about going to the theater because you read online that this guy's, doing his business when he shouldn't be in the theater. It was one theater. That seems to be the only isolated incident. I doubt this is going to become a thing. It just was this guy and it made the news. It's not indicative of the theater going experience. Support your local theaters, especially the smaller ones or like the independent ones. Like you have a specific one you like to go to. Please do, because we can't let the movie theater experience die. And I'm going to get off my soapbox because it's too important to me. Obviously, Damon, I do a podcast for free for the past 5 years because I fucking love movies. And I don't want people to just abandon the theater experience because one guy decided to whip it out.
I had a guy in when I went, Thor Love and Thunder, which was awful. There was a guy
that was a bad theater going experience just because of what was on screen.
But there was a guy in my theater who literally fell asleep and was snoring about halfway through the movie, and we were all loudly snoring. Like, when you're snoring so loud that it's over a Marvel movie, you're snoring loudly. But the movie was so bad that ended up being the highlight. We were all cracking up. Our entire theater was just laughing at this dude passed out. Like, he wasn't drunk. He literally just fell asleep watching the movie.
Yeah.
And he, one of those, we had the reclining.
Oh yeah.
He just passed out. He was like, he just fell asleep. And he slept through the entire second half of the movie. And every 20 minutes or so, you'd hear him get a really big snore, and it was super loud. And the entire theater was just cracking up. It literally made Thor: Love and Thunder an enjoyable experience because the movie sure didn't do the job. But so that's what I'm saying. Again, you can still, even that, that would be considered annoying to most people. To me, it was funny because the movie was awful, and this guy just sleeping through big explosions, giant. It was a loud theater. This guy's just snoozing through it all, and I was cracking up the entire time. It was the best part because the movie didn't do the job. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I love the theater experience. And Love Lies Bleeding, to get back to our film we're reviewing today, this is an indie film, so you might have to look for it. My favorite theater in town where I go didn't actually show it. I had to go to a different theater than I normally go to, which was weird because they usually show everything. The normal theater I go to now was the one that showed Terrifier. It was the one that showed When Evil Lurks that I saw in theaters. It shows everything, but for some weird reason, it wasn't opening Love Lies Bleeding tonight, which was odd. So I had to go to the one actually 5 minutes from my house, an AMC theater. Yeah, but again, this film is a smaller indie film, and a lot of people will say, well, I could see this at home. And you can, because this is, these are not the big, you're not going to hear the big explosions and you don't need to be in an IMAX theater. It's not Oppenheimer. It's not that kind of movie. But I still loved seeing this in the theater. Just the color palette that Rose Glass uses in this movie, and this also goes to cinematography as well, using that dark, dingy background of the Southwest and then making it dirty and grungy in this small little town that you're in. As I talked about earlier, just because of the town itself, you feel like you're always one step away from needing a shower. That experience is made bigger and bolder because I'm in the theater. That was me personally. I don't know if you had the same experience, like seeing the visuals, even though this isn't a big movie, a quote unquote big movie, being in the theater made this experience better for Love Lies Bleeding.
And Rose Glass actually has a great visual style. So it is worth it to see it on a big screen. But there's even one step further, and that is like, and this is another reason why I'm way into the theater experience, is that you are now a captive audience member. By the way, if you're a jerk who just sits on your phone in the theater and texts and like talks to people and shit like that, like you are part of the problem. I am talking to you right now. Like if you're at home, you're 10 times more likely to pick up your phone. You're 10 times more likely to just walk away or do something. You know what? I'm going to go to the refrigerator, and you leave part of the movie. With a movie like Love Lies Bleeding, you do that, you'll come back and you'll go, what the fuck's happening? And then you'll all of a sudden in your mind, you'll go, this movie's fucking weird. I don't even understand what's going on, because you're not really paying attention at home. There are outside distractions. You can't help it. When you're at home, things distract you. It's very difficult. Even me, when I used to watch movies late at night, I don't do it as much often now. I sometimes would find myself drifting in my phone. I go, no, I can't do that. I really have to like focus on this movie. It's hard to do when you're at home, when you have the luxury of just going, I can give myself whatever I want. I can put out whatever kind of input I want into my eyes right now. And then it muddies the movie for you. And then all of a sudden you don't have the movie going experience that you would if you sit with an audience in a 100-foot screen, watching the visuals that glass puts in front of you. And then all of a sudden you walk out going, whoa, what the hell was that? Whether that's good or bad for you is entirely up to you, but you got an experience out of it. And I think this is a movie that requires an experience. So if it is in the theater where you're at, highly recommend go see this.
And to get back to the movie itself, because we got to get into spoilers soon, because there's so much of this film we can't talk about with spoilers, but this film is visually striking, and if you liked, even again, this is not the same as Saint Maud. If you saw Saint Maud and you're like, I'm going to go see this because it's going to be something similar to that, it's not. Be aware of that going in. This is not that. This is more of a crime noir psychological thriller. You could argue that Saint Maud definitely has some psychological thriller elements, but that is much more of a actual horror film. This is not. So don't go in thinking this is going to be Saint Maud Part 2, because it's not. I don't want to fool anybody who liked that one and they're going to rush out based on our recommendation to see this. It's not that. That being said, I would argue, because I liked Saint Maud, I didn't love it, because it did get into that weird surrealism a little bit too much for me, where I was just like, it kind of lost me at points, where it just got too, what I call fever dream, where it just like, it dips off into where I feel like I just took a hit of acid and I'm watching somebody's acid trip and I don't really know what I'm seeing. I would argue, from my perspective, I'm not sitting here trying to judge, by the way, I'm not trying to compare, but if I was saying like, which film would I prefer to see? I would prefer to see Love Lies Bleeding, because it is a much more straightforward crime noir thriller. And the relationship that you see between the main characters, this is a very small, Saint Maud was really 2 characters, ultimately. This branches out a little bit more to like 4 or 5, but really you're dealing with Jackie and Lou, the 2 main characters. The female bodybuilder is Jackie, and Lou is the gym owner, played by Kristen Stewart. Now, you add in Ed Harris, who to me is one of the most criminally, I would say underrated. I think people know how good he is.
I think he's rated.
But what I like about Ed Harris is that he takes projects like this. Like this, he's a major actor. Like, he's been in a lot of major films. Has he won an Oscar? No, he's been nominated for an Oscar.
Probably been nominated, but yeah, he's in anything big. He was in Maverick. I mean, not too long ago. He's in every big thing.
Yeah, he's in The Rock, which is a huge film with Nick Cage. I love that movie with Sean Connery. Remember The Rock?
Oh yeah.
I love Ed Harris, but I love that he takes and does these smaller movies like this. And he's so good in this film. Like, he is so good in this film. And he plays, like, he has such a way about him. He carries himself with such power and such swagger that you just kind of feel that whenever he's around in this film. And then Dave Franco is in this. I didn't know Dave Franco was in this film until literally yesterday. I was watching a featurette just to write my intro for the show, and Dave Franco popped up, and I was like, Dave Franco's in this movie? I had no idea. Jenna Malone is in this movie. Jenna Malone's another one. Jenna Malone is very much a that girl. Like, oh, what has she been in? I've seen her in other things. That's Jenna Malone. She's in this. I had no idea she was in this until, again, I saw that featurette. So this branches out a little bit more, but you are really drilled down into caring about the two main characters, this relationship that starts building between Lou and Jackie, and then the outside forces that start messing with their relationship. And then it kind of becomes an internal conflict of what starts messing with their relationship. So it's a really complex story like that.
It is, Damon. Shall we spoiler it up now?
Let's get into spoilers. So, Love Lies Bleeding in theaters right now. Go check it out. If you didn't hear us just slather all over the theater experience, go check it out if you can in theaters. It's absolutely worth your time, especially if you like crime, noir, thrillers. If you like that kind of that erotic, just trust me. I don't want to throw out a bunch of titles to compare it to, but it's not straight horror. Be aware, but if you enjoyed the visual and the artistry of Saint Maud, you will enjoy the artistry and the exploration of the characters that you will get in Love Lies Bleeding, even though they are two totally different films. There you go. So let's get into spoilers, Patrick. There's a lot to talk about with spoilers before we get to categories, so let's just get into it. I'll let you go first.
Well, Damon, I think what's important, especially to our listening audience, is to talk about why there's a lot of horror. I mean, there's a lot of thrillers out there, but not often do they really stretch into the realm of psychological thriller. And I think that's where horror typically comes in. I don't know if you agree or not. What do you think? And I have my opinions. What do you think it is about Love Lies Bleeding that actually allows it to step over so that a podcast like ours can talk about it? Because I got my thoughts.
So there's one particular incident where the real tension explodes in this film, and from that moment on, it is full on psychological thriller from that moment on. And that is, you learn pretty early on that Lou has a fractured, estranged relationship with her father, Lou Sr., who is the crime boss in town. But she does still have a relationship with her sister, Beth. And her sister, Beth, is married to a real shitbag named JJ, played by Dave Franco. Right away when you meet Beth early in the film, she's got bruises on her eyes, cuts on her face. It doesn't take a genius to figure out she's living in a domestic violence situation. But sadly, as we all know, a lot of times what happens in these situations is the woman is so berated mentally that she can't imagine a world without her husband. Even though her husband physically abuses her, she can't imagine a world without him. And so she always falls into the, he didn't mean it. You know, he apologized. He'll never do it again. That thing. We all know that pattern. That's a very real pattern. I'm not making light of that, but that's kind of where we are. And at one point in the movie, Beth ends up in the hospital beaten to a pulp. And it's hard to look at. I mean, it is hard. Like when they show her in the hospital, it's hard to look at. And Lou wants revenge. Lou wants to take out JJ. But JJ works for her father. He's kind of like her father's sort of right-hand man, a little bit. Like maybe not right hand, maybe like right foot. You know, he's not that like he's kind of an idiot a little bit, but he's, you know, he works for him. So he's not full on like I can trust you with everything, but like, you know,
he plays the game.
He plays the game. She wants revenge, but Lou Sr., his daughter is the one getting the absolute pulp beaten out of her. But he's kind of like, well, we'll have a talk with JJ. And Lou's done talking. But Jackie, who at this point has been injecting bigger and bigger doses of steroids upon meeting Lou's like, oh, you're a bodybuilder? You want to get bigger and stronger? I got just a boatload of German steroids in the back. Let's start pumping some iron. And so if you've ever been around anyone with steroids, and I have a lot, the behavior that Jackie starts to exhibit while heightened in this movie, for sure, is not unreal. I've seen it. I've seen the nicest guys in the world, just teddy bears guys, huge, muscular, beefed up dudes, nicest guys in the world. Somebody bumps them the wrong way and they just fly off the fucking handle. That's the steroids. Like, it's just like a hair trigger temper. Jackie takes it upon herself to avenge Beth for Lou. And so she goes to JJ's house and she literally beats him to death. And that is the exciting incident that just sets off a chain reaction of events after that, because Lou can't fathom letting Jackie go down for this crime, so she helps her cover it up. And that just sparks, as I said, it's a love that sparks a fire that ends up turning into an inferno in this town.
Yeah, and everything you said is kind of all is building to that moment where Jackie goes and basically destroys JJ's face. But before that, the way Rose Glass builds the world, it's incredibly dreadful. And when there's this kind of whirlwind romance between Jackie and Lou, but Lou's got just as many problems. Jackie is homeless when we meet her. She's just hitching her way to Las Vegas, working out literally on the sides of freeways. She's not well to do, but Lou brings her in, and Lou brings her drugs right away. Oh, I got a big crush on you. You want to be a bodybuilding champion? I got drugs if you want them. Already there's like, that doesn't feel right. That feels wrong. Oh, yeah, I don't talk to my dad. You work for him? Shit, that sucks. I fucking hate that guy. Why do you hate your dad? I can't really talk about it. That's a fucking problem. What's going on there? And then there's these little surrealistic flashes, right? You get in, all of a sudden you'll just kind of see in Lou's head for a second, something drenched in red and blood red. And there's this kind of ominous music and something is happening, but you don't quite know what it is. You kind of keep it right off there because it's in the back of Lou's mind, what she's done and what she's witnessed in the past with her dad. And it all is this boilerplate that is just about to completely combust. She completely hates JJ because he's beating on her sister. And then she finds out that when Jackie first rolled into town, she might have had a little moment with JJ because she was trying to kind of keep it going, trying to, she needed a job recommendation. JJ was happy to oblige her for certain particular exchanges. Let's just put it that way. So that creates a problem. And then they all go out to dinner to try and have a lovely dinner, which many dysfunctional families, I know, Damon, I know I'm talking to a fellow dysfunctional family member. Dinners usually are disasters. If everybody needs to go out to dinner, and I come from a family of 9, when we're all sitting at that dinner table, something goes wrong every fucking time. It's no different here for Jackie, Lou, and JJ and Beth. And it goes wrong, and her sister pays for it in a terrible, terrible way. And that just everything careens off the side of the cliff after that, because Jackie is juiced the fuck up because of what Lou gave her. She was going to go au naturel. She likes the idea of testing her own strength. Lou actually was a bad influence on her in that respect and created a monster, almost literally and figuratively, to the point that Jackie goes and fucking, makes tomato sauce of this guy's face. And then it's what starts to unravel. This moment I loved is that, okay, so she beats the fuck out of JJ and destroys him and kills him. So Lou comes to her rescue, and all of a sudden, Damon, tell me if you weren't like, bingo. Lou is real good at cleaning up the scene. Like, she really knows how to clean up the scene, and they do it very efficiently. Rose is very efficient with the way her shot selection and all that stuff. And you just get the sense that maybe Lou has done this before. Oh, yeah. That's another level of dread where you're like, oh, great. What has Jackie gotten herself into?
And Jackie, that's where it flips, because Jackie then starts to realize that she's in over her head, but she's also in over her head because she's now juiced to the gills on every steroid that they've ever produced in Germany. And she's now dependent on this to get her to her bodybuilding competition. But once she sees Lou basically devise a plan in a matter of seconds to get rid of JJ's body and save her from potentially going to prison, Jackie starts to realize, hey, maybe this isn't the healthiest relationship that I should be getting myself into. Because in the beginning, you're kind of sympathetic to Lou. She's stuck in this gym. She kind of just she's living a very miserable life. And Jackie kind of is like the exciting new person that gets introduced into her life. You kind of realize, as you mentioned, she immediately introduces her to steroids. She juices her up. She gives her a place to live. She kind of becomes dependent on Lou. And then when Jackie kills the guy and Lou just like immediately covers it up, it's not of like, let's talk this through. Let's, whatever. She's like, roll him up in the rug, clean up the house, dump him in a ravine, let's burn the car. Jackie starts to realize, oh shit, I'm in over my head right now because I not only just killed a guy because of my roid rage, but my girlfriend is pretty nefarious, and this is not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, so all the dread all of a sudden starts kind of hovering. Well, they actually do a good job of balancing it. It's really hovering over Jackie because you feel for her. She was adopted in Oklahoma, and clearly family life was not great for her because she's over here hitching her way to Vegas. So it's not like her family's helping her out. And you go, fuck, like she really rolled into the wrong town and she just got in with the wrong people for her. So you're feeling bad for her, and you just don't know. And she's geeking out of her fucking mind on roids. Like she is really starting to get fucking loose. And you're like, oh no, like she's careening off a cliff. She's having weird visions. She's started like, you're like, what is this tumbling towards? And then on the flip side, now you know that what Lou has done to cover up this incident with JJ has sparked a brand new fire with her dad, and you realize that there is something much more sinister going on under the surface with Lou and Lou Senior. And like, man, I think how I would compare this is, you remember Boogie Nights and how it's kind of a saga. I feel like that's a much longer movie in terms of just like sitting and watching it. The experience of it feels much longer than this movie. This movie's just over 90 minutes. And I think I want to say Boogie Nights is like 2.5, almost 3 hours.
It is, yeah. It's like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Minutes, yeah.
So there's like the final third of Boogie Nights is like this cocaine fueled fucking descent into madness. And I feel like Rose Glass was able to do that from the JJ moment on for like a good, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. Really let us live in this world that is absolutely dreadful. She just knew how to do it. I guess the best way to say is more efficiently than the way Paul Thomas Anderson did it in Boogie Nights. Although I love that movie, I don't have a problem with that movie. It's just a very long movie. This, she managed to like wrap it all up in this sort of just what the best way I could say is like, it's like a careening car going off the cliff on fire. What's going to happen? How are they going to get themselves out of this situation? I think that was the big like kind of magic trick of it all. It's like they are in way too deep. How are they going to get themselves out of this? And of course, Lou Senior, played by the great Ed Harris, he has designs. He has his thumb on everybody. He knows how to manipulate everyone. He ends up manipulating Jackie. Jackie becomes his arm. And that's a problem because, again, she's geeked out. She's freaked out. She's traumatized. She just killed somebody. I don't think from what I can tell, she's never killed anyone. So she's in a completely manic state. Now you're worried about Lou. You're like, well, fuck, Lou, how's Lou going to get out of this? How's Jackie going to get out of this? They are being backed into this corner on fire. And to me, that was the gripping and thrilling part of this movie, and where the psychological elements come in, the rose glass surrealism that she kind of peppers in through Jackie's drug abuse and through Lou's broken mind from clearly the time that she spent with her dad being a cleaner for his business. These two are absolutely careening towards the end, and that is where the dread comes in this movie. That's where this movie truly sings.
Can I run real quick with your Boogie Nights comparison? Just one other.
Please.
It's a great comparison. We mentioned how in this story, when you meet Lou, the Kristen Stewart, not Lou Senior, when you meet Kristen Stewart's character, again, you kind of think her in the beginning is like the sympathetic character because she's
right.
Like in this one horse town. Again, she's very down on her luck and she just looks miserable. And then,
literally shoveling shit when you meet her.
Yeah, literally scooping shit out of a toilet when the film begins. And then she meets Jackie, this exciting new person in her life, this dangling new toy that she's never seen before. And so you're kind of like happy for Lou in a way. Like you can tell, like she just kind of like going through the paces of her life. Like if nothing else happened between now and 30 years from now, this would be her life until she was old and gray and decrepit and dying. Because just nothing happens to her. Nothing happens for her. Jackie is what happens for her. But much like Boogie Nights, when we meet Mark Wahlberg's character, Eddie Adams, and he's this kind of idealistic, bright eyed, not so bright guy. He gets enthralled into world of pornography. Now you'd think, okay, well, it's a seedy world of pornography, but at the beginning, he has the right people around him. They're looking out for him. He becomes a star. He's buying his own home, his car. He's doing everything he always said he wanted to do. I'm going to be a big, bright, shining star is what he says. But the person who was supposed to be the most protective over him, which was Amber Waves, which was Julianne Moore's character, she looked at him as a son in a way because her own kid had been taken away from her because she was a drug-fueled porn star. She looked at Eddie, or as Dirk Diggler, as her son. She treated him like a son. But much like she was fucked up, she had to get him fucked up. So you remember the New Year's Eve party where she basically makes him do cocaine and then has sex with him. That sends him on the downward spiral of like, oh, you're doing pretty well for just being a porn star, but that's not enough. You got to be like me, a drug-addicted porn star. And that sends him down a spiral, down the drain, and out the other end. And then, again, what happens at the end of the movie. Very much the same thing here. Jackie seems like a pretty put-together person. Yes, she's homeless and hitchhiking her way to Vegas, but she doesn't seem like a terribly bad person. Yes, she bones JJ to get a job, but, she's kind of like, this is what I have to do to survive. And I'm not going to fault someone for doing something to survive.
Yeah, she's into guys and girls too. So for her, it was like, whatever. I had a little thing.
Yeah. And so Lou gives her the steroids. And yes. I mean, to her credit, Jackie gets involved with Lou Sr. on the job side of things. But the incident, she's not doing anything criminally related for Lou Sr. She's waiting tables, and he at one point takes her out to the gun range to teach her how to shoot. But at no point does Lou Sr. say, hey, I need you to run these guns to the other side of Mexico, which you realize he's a gun runner. That's his business. That's his illegal business. He never does that. It's Lou, Kristen Stewart's character, who's like, here's these German steroids. Let's get you jacked up and pumped up for this tournament in Vegas. Come stay at my place. They get involved, and it's a very erotic, this is what Lou has always wanted, because Lou has this other girl in town named, what is her name in the movie? Daisy.
Daisy, yeah.
Daisy, who is, she's like the friend with benefits. She's like the one you hook up with every now and again, but you really don't want to be around her for too long. You're like, this is like you hook up and then you don't stay together for the night. You're like, you got to go. I don't want to wake up next to you in the morning. That's kind of what Lou's world is. But then Jackie actually excites her. Jackie is like,
and they're in love. They are genuinely into each other. Yeah.
And they are way into each other. But Jackie's journey gets taken completely off the path because Julianne Moore gave her the coke. Like, that's what Lou is. And so then it just like, once she gets into steroids, and that's where you're dealing with the surrealism. And you see it in the trailer with like her muscles like growing bigger and bulging, the veins popping, with very visceral imagery. After she kills JJ, she starts to realize, oh shit, I'm in deep. But she's also addicted to the steroids because she's going to this competition still. But she wants to get away from Lou. And at one point, she finally breaks away from Lou and leaves. Lou basically locks her in the house so she can clean up the dead body. And Jackie breaks out and leaves and goes to Vegas without her. She's like, I got to get out of here. She gets to Vegas, gets to her competition, and she's so whacked out at this point, both dealing with the trauma of murdering a guy, literally bashing his face in to the point where it's just a pulp and like the bottom of a jaw. And she's so jacked up on steroids, she gets to the competition and she settles in, she does her thing, she gets all pumped up, she gets ready, she goes out on stage for the first routine, everything works out great. Then it's to the solos. She gets to the solos and everything starts working okay, but then the body starts rejecting her. The trauma overloads her. The steroids overload her, and she actually births out Lou on stage. It's just her mind of like, she can't escape Lou. That's the way I took it. Like
Lou is in her body, Lou literally something. Yeah,
Lou is part of her now, and she tries to eject her from the body. In reality, she just vomits on stage, and everyone basically laughs at her, and she goes over and just absolutely beats the shit out of one of the other bodybuilding girls. And while she was in jail, she tries to call Lou because that's her only lifeline. And Daisy picks up the phone and she's like, she wants nothing to do with you. And so her heart's broken. She's left alone. And who comes in to rescue her? Lou Sr. That is now she is living under Lou Sr.'s thumb. She has to follow by his orders, and she has no other choice because she actually did murder a guy. So, in a way, like by the time you get to towards the tail end of this movie, you realize that like Jackie's the victim in all this. Like she is really the victim in this whole thing when you really think about it.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking, but like, and man, so many of those little moments where I just go, like, how did Rose Glass do this so efficiently? Like, it does not drag on. It's like she can take the dialogue moments, and the dialogue moments are perfectly crafted to just push you into the next sequence. So, for instance, when Lou Sr. bails Jackie out of jail, he just lays it out in the car, real simple for her. Real simple. We got one witness to all of this. There's only one person who's seen you guys with the body. So you know what we need to do. What's your other option? So simple. So it didn't require like a few different scenes and a few different pieces to come together. Rose Glass, and again, I want to credit her co-writer, Veronica Tofilska. Very efficient scene making right there. Just crafty shit. Like, that's the kind of shit where I'm like, you see, you can do it under 2 hours. You can do it. Watch how Rose Glass does it right here. A little scene is enough to push her ahead, enough to put a gun in Jackie's hand yet again. You know, well, not yet again, but get her ready to kill yet again, even though she has no business killing. You realize now she has no choice. And then there are just those moments, man. I don't want to like completely narrate the movie for people, but there's just many moments like that where it's like the piece of dialogue leads to a sequence that is so harrowing, and you're literally gripping the seat because you're just like, fuck, dude, what is going to happen right now? What is going to go down? Like who is going to die next? And that's thrilling, Damon. That's the thrill. That's the excitement. That's what we come here for. Love Lies Bleeding does it incredibly.
And I can't say for absolute certainty, because I did read a lot of interviews with Rose Glass as I was getting ready for the show tonight, and they talked about the title and where she got the title. You know, she liked the title. I'm reading probably way too much into this, but the way I took Love Lies Bleeding as the title is that Jackie and Lou really do love each other. Like, there is a genuine love and caring for them. And Lou genuinely does care for Jackie. This isn't like you're just going to help me escape my everyday shitty life.
Right.
Like, he actually does love Jackie. There's real love there. But you and I both know some relationships are so toxic that the love that's not enough. Like, it's just, so I think the Love Lies Bleeding, the narrative I got by the end of the film, where basically, Jackie has now murdered, shot another person, and basically Lou is ready to just Lou Sr. is ready to just get rid of her, but first he needs to make sure that his daughter isn't going to rat him out to the feds. So he's using her as basically a hostage to use his leverage over his daughter. By the end, once again, even when when Lou shows up and finds Jackie tied up on her dad's property, she unties her. Jackie punches Lou. She wants to get the fuck away from her. She realizes this woman has been nothing but disaster since they met. She got her hooked on steroids. Now she's killed 2 people in her head. She's like, I need to get the fuck out of here. And Lou's like, hold on now. No. It's not that bad. I'm going to take care of this. So by the end of the movie, when they roll off into the sunset together, Jackie and Lou, because that's basically the end of the movie, you're sitting there thinking, okay, these two characters really genuinely do care and love for each other. But boy, is this just not the relationship you need to be in. Like, this is not, again, like we talked about JJ and Beth, like that's an abusive relationship. Of course, that's on this. You can tell on the surface that's a relationship that should. Like, I have no idea. They don't really explore the relationship. You have no idea how much JJ actually.
Yeah, it's just easy to understand.
It's easy to understand because you're seeing JJ as beating the shit out of his wife, and that's like a visual. Like, you understand they should not be together. Lou and Jackie, by the end, they genuinely care. But they only have each other. But boy, are they far worse together than they were apart.
Yeah, really. I mean, really, like, you don't feel good about the end for them. You feel good that they got away from Lou Sr., but if you've paid any attention, you go, this is not going to end well for these two, no matter where, no matter how it goes. No matter how this goes. I think what was it? It was Florence Pugh talks about how she always tries to feel good about where she leaves a character when the movie is done. I got to imagine if Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien don't feel good about where they left these characters at all, like where they left these characters, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of dread. There's a lot of unknown open road in front of them. And it's almost certain to end in tragedy.
Yeah, you're like, these two should not be together, and this is going to end badly. But that's kind of how that's the way I interpreted it, was they ended together, which is what they wanted. But these two things, it's not oil and water necessarily. They go well together, but when
Yes.
they go well, and you also kind of realize by the end of the film, because all the little flashbacks you see of Lou with her dad, you kind of realize that she used to be her dad's right hand, more or less, and she actually killed a guy on her dad's orders. And that's how she knew about where he dumped the bodies and all those kind of things. You kind of realize, like, she got away from him because she didn't want to be in that life anymore. So she got away from her father. But then by the end, she's cleaned up a couple of bodies. She's killed a cop. She's, all this other stuff. She's very much she's very much daddy's daughter. Like, you realize Lou is very much her father's daughter. And when she realizes in the back of the truck that Daisy didn't die from the gunshot through the face, she very callously, with Jackie basically passed out from all the emotional turmoil and everything that's gone on these past couple of days, she just crawls in the back of the truck and literally just chokes her to death. Like, Daisy's still kind of alive, barely, but she's alive. Just chokes her to death and chucks her out in the middle of the desert. Lou is very much her father's daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that final shot is, I think it's just Jackie inside the cab of the truck as you watch Lou drag the body into the desert, and you're like poor Jackie. Like, she just came to the wrong town. She fell in love with the wrong girl. It's bad news. This is just bad news.
Yeah. All right, let's get into categories. We do have a lot of categories we want to get into this movie. And let's kick things off as we do each and every week on this show, and that is with best performance. Patrick, when you look at Love Lies Bleeding, what was your best performance?
Damon, first of all, what a bunch of performances. Fantastic in terms of performances. But my best performance does indeed go to Katie O'Brien, who plays Jackie. Just, I don't know the innocence when she starts out, but also just exuding a lot of strength. And I don't just mean physically. I mean, she can kind of hold her own talking to Lou Sr., which is not an easy thing to do. He's a really intimidating guy. And then she sort of melts into Lou's arms, which, by the way, Lou, played by Kristen Stewart, Katie O'Brien, actually like an actual stunt person, an actor who is in fantastic physical shape, a real physical specimen. You get the feeling like Jackie could snap Lou like a twig, but she melts into Lou's arms when they're in love together. Like Lou is her protector in that weird way, like in a really weird way. So the dynamics that Katie O'Brien had to put out there as an actor who does a lot of acting but hasn't really come to the forefront and actually been a proper co-star with somebody before, especially the likes of Kristen Stewart and Ed Harris. She does a great job in this movie, and I out of all the performances, she blew me away.
Katie O'Brien is going to be the breakout star from this film, and that's not because Kristen Stewart isn't great. Kristen Stewart is great. She's been nominated for a lot of awards. She's won some. She's incredible. If you go into this film thinking Kristen Stewart's a great actor, you'd be right, and you would not be wrong when you walk out of the film, because she's very much still that. Katie O'Brien was the unknown here, and I'd seen her. I think the only thing I'd ever seen her in before was The Mandalorian. She starred in a few episodes of The Mandalorian. Outside of that, I really wasn't familiar with her. And she really, like, when you see this movie and it's over, you're going to see Katie O'Brien get cast in a lot of stuff coming up here. I don't know what all it's going to be. Couldn't begin what action movie, what Marvel character she's going to play. She is going to get picked up from this movie because she's that good. She really does steal the show. And that's going against two incredible Hollywood heavyweights in Kristen Stewart and Ed Harris. And that's who she interacts with the most in this film. She's incredible. And to be fair, she is the best performance. So I'm going to give her flowers because that is. But I also want to mention one other. And again, Kristen Stewart is amazing. I'm a big Kristen Stewart fan. Ever since she got away from Twilight, which those movies are god awful, ever since she got away from that and started doing real stuff, which you can, anytime people bring up Twilight, she kind of like, she's like, yeah, we could not talk about that.
Hey, it pays the bills so I can do cool movies, all right?
Yeah, like she's very much gone into like the indie actor kind of thing, and that's totally fine. But anyways, everything she's done in recent years, she's great in. She's incredible. So I want to give her flowers too. But I do want my favorite my favorite performance in this movie, just because it was so just evil, was Ed Harris as Lou Sr. He is such a, and I think if you ever watched Westworld, he plays the man in black, and he is such a good bad guy in that show. Similar energy here, not the same character by any means, but like similar energy where you just meet him, he immediately exudes power. You get that right away, and then you also kind of get the sense that like when he talks, you shut the fuck up and listen. When he tells you to do something, you don't question it. He says jump, you say how high. There's just a certain gravity to Ed Harris that he carries with him. And I don't know. Ed Harris, what is he? Maybe like 5'9", 5'10".
That's
50?
the thing. Not a big guy, but really intimidating on screen.
Very commanding presence. You know what I mean? Like, he's not the guy you would look at and say, man, this guy's an ultimate badass. Like, he's not walking around like Arnold Schwarzenegger, 6'3" and 280 ripped. He's like 5'9", 5'10", probably $165.
Yeah.
And he just has this commanding presence to him that you listen and he tells you what to do and you jump to it. And he really does carry that. Like, you really do understand that he's evil, but not in the I got to yell at you way to be evil. He's like the very calm, cool, collected, sinister gangster.
Yeah, he does. I think what Henry Rollins said, the most dangerous dogs don't bark. And that's kind of what Ed Harris is in this. He's no bark. He's all bite. He doesn't have to raise his voice. He just doesn't. And I think he rarely does in this movie. It's almost always a very calm, very serious voice. And it just, every single line means business. Like, you get the impact. I love watching performances like that, because you're just like, shit. Like, that's just something you can't teach. He just has it. And it's very good. And he's perfectly cast as a dad. Also with that goofy styling where he's like completely bald up top and has super long hair on the sides. It's an odd look, and he rocks it with a kind of confidence that only a guy like that could.
My favorite line in the film is not even when he's on screen, he's off screen. And it's when he picks up Jackie from Las Vegas and brings her back to his town after she has killed JJ, and he's trying to cover it up. And basically she needs to kill Daisy. He just puts a gun in front of her with a silencer and just says, call me when it's done. There's just such a damn. Like, when he said that in the film, and she said, and she's broken. I mean, she's lost the competition. Her dream has been crushed. She's gone to jail for beating the hell out of another woman. Like, Jackie's broken at this point. Like, she is absolutely broken. And Lou Sr. picks her up and carries her back to the town, and then just sets a gun with a silencer in front of her and says, call me when it's done. And it's almost like, well, you can't refuse him. So yeah, I guess I'll call him when it's done. Like, he just has that presence in this film.
Oh man, so good. So many great performers in this film.
So let's talk about the MVP of this movie. And this is, of course, our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after the great Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, when he jumped down a flight of stairs and gone into a basement with a butcher knife to save the day, wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. Ken Foray, you are our hero, and that is why we name our MVP award after you. So, Patrick, for Love Lies Bleeding, who is your MVP?
My MVP goes to Anna Baryshnikov, who plays Daisy. Now, we kind of mentioned her a little bit, right? She's Lou's like booty call, basically. Like, she kind of has her around when she needs her. But once the shit hits the fan, Daisy becomes the type of tension that is absolutely like it gets under your skin in a really bad way. She's the only person that saw Lou and Jackie with JJ's car the night he died. Like, very suspect. She knows all about it. Lou has to walk this incredibly fine tightrope. You get the sense that maybe Daisy is on meth or something like that. Like she's a bit unhinged, and she just has these weird, wild designs on what she wants to say about what happened that night. And you're like, God damn, would you just shut up? Just don't say nothing. That comes down to Anna Baryshnikov really making a character. She could have just been fully obnoxious, but there was something sinister under this sort of flighty, meth induced innocence that made her so dangerous that I said my MVP this week is going to her because this was a performance that had me going fuck. How do we fix this situation? We fix it with a fucking bullet through the head. That's how we fix it. But just anytime she popped back up after the incident happened, you were like, shit, she is going to fuck everything up in a bad way. That level of like dread, like please don't fuck this up. Like she was a powder keg ready to explode.
Yeah, you know what she reminded me of? You've seen I assume you've watched Breaking Bad, right?
Oh yeah.
What is it? Who are the two characters that are friends of Jesse? Skinny Pete and what's the other guy's name?
Badger?
Badger and Skinny Pete.
Yeah.
You kind of meet them, they're kind of like the dumb fuck twins. Like they're just like they're just like his meth dealing buddies, but they do end up having like important roles in the show, like what they actually do, even in the finale, like when they actually help out Walt, to blackmail his former,
I love that
his former business partners. But so they're kind of idiots, but like they're useful idiots. I guess the best way to say it. That's kind of what Daisy is. Like she's Lou's booty call, and she's kind of obsessed with Lou. Like she really likes Lou. Like she wants Lou to be her girlfriend. But Lou's kind of like, yeah, I can't really talk to you, so let's just hook up every once in a while and then you go away. And then when she realizes that Daisy has the information about her being seen in JJ's car the night he died, Lou is there's a great conversation where they're in a diner together after spending the night.
So tense.
And Daisy's eating pancakes and sipping on a milkshake of all things. And she walks her through this, and she's trying to basically talk her out of what she saw. And Daisy's, again, she's a little messed up. She's not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, so you kind of see it working. But Daisy's not that dumb. She realizes what she saw, and she realizes the leverage that she has. And Lou has to basically cater her. But by the end of it, you kind of figure out she's kind of convinced Daisy to shut the fuck up, more or less. And then 10 seconds later, back at her house, she gets a bullet to the back of her head because Jackie is following Lou Sr.'s order that she's the loose end and she needs to be tied up. But yeah, she's great. And she does play this kind of like, again, I compare it to Skinny Pete and Badger from Breaking Bad. Like they're kind of brought in as kind of comic relief, but the more they're in the show, the more you see them, they do serve a purpose. They're like a useful idiot.
To go back to Boogie Nights for a second, remember near the end when everything is sort of collapsing in on itself and Don Cheadle's in that donut shop?
Yeah.
And that guy comes in and robs the place, and you're like, oh no, what if he shoots Don Cheadle? His pregnant wife is in the car. They're like,
now, motherfucker, give me all your cash right now.
That guy sticking up the donut shop is essentially Daisy in this movie. You're going, how do we stop this guy who's going to ruin everything? That's very much Daisy in this movie. Like it's very much the same feeling. Like I feel like Rose Glass didn't mention this in her inspirations for this movies, but I get a lot of Boogie Nights out of this. I just get a more efficient version of it. But it's like, man, this feels very Boogie Nights in that you're like, like it's very like nail biting tension in a very simple way.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So for my MVP, me, like we tend to, depending on the movie we're doing, I like to go crew a lot of times because, Rose Glass is the writer director, but there's people behind the scenes. And I read an interview with her where she was talking about this movie takes place in 1989. Rose Glass is, I think, 34. So she's not quite of that era where she grew up in the 80s. And for Saint Maud, she had worked with a guy named Paul Davies, who is the sound designer on Saint Maud. Saint Maud has incredible sound design. If you ever see that movie, it is some of the most jarring moments in Saint Maud come from the audio, from the sound of like these exploding moments in the sound effects, which of course go along with the visuals, but they're the kind of jarring moments as the sound design. Paul Davies does a great job. Yeah. He also did the sound design on Love Lies Bleeding, but he also helped Rose Glass choose the music. And Rose Glass said in a couple interviews, because the 80s are so well known for like the 80s. You say 80s music to anybody, even if you're born in 2004, you probably know what that means. You think of 80s music, you think of Take On Me and, Video Killed the Radio Star and maybe some Toto in there. But you know what 80s music sounds like. Sunglasses at Night. You know what 80s music is. If you hear the word 80s music, you can immediately say, oh, well, that song or that song. You're going to know what they are. Rose Glass said, this is such a grimy, gritty movie. I can't use the typical 80s music for this thing. I can't just use every 80s song you'd hear in every other movie that takes place in the 80s. So Paul Davies went out of his way to choose music from the 80s that you wouldn't normally hear. So the trailer is from a group called Bronski Beat. That's the music you hear in the trailer, which again, if you're a goth kid or you grew up in like that synth wave of the 80s, you know who Bronski Beat is. They're like, they're like the distant cousins of Depeche Mode, but
yeah,
underground. You don't know Bronski Beat unless you're of that era. He also helped her pick out artists like Patrick Cowley, which is, I believe, the scene when Lou and Jackie first hook up is set to Patrick Cowley music. Throbbing Gristle was another one that he put in there. And he just chose music that was of that era, but you wouldn't immediately recognize and say, oh, well, it's, I don't know why I always default to Take On Me. I just think it has like the
very 80s. Yeah. Don't You Want Me, Baby? That's another one.
Yeah. And I like 80s music. To be fair, I do like 80s music, but like she just didn't want to default to that. So Paul Davies crafted the soundtrack for this movie. When you see it, you understand it. Like the music in this movie is from the 80s, but it's not it's not radio hits. It's not the songs you know when you hear about Essential 80s. None of the Throbbing Gristle is not showing up on Essential 80s, but Paul Davies had a vision for that and used it in this film. And Rose Glass paid a big credit to him for helping kind of craft the sound of this movie.
Paul Davies and I would get along very well. Like somebody like that would, that's kind of like, I have a mix somewhere, like a playlist somewhere that is very Paul Davies Love Lies Bleeding. Like that's the kind of shit I love from the 80s. It's just a little more underground. It's not like super obscure. It's when you go the next stage deeper and you find that weird dark wave shit, like it's all over this movie. So I absolutely loved the soundtrack to this movie.
Yeah, it was great. So Paul Davies gets my MVP award. Let's move on to Best Gore. And I'm going to let you announce Best Gore, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you ahead of time, yours is the best gore. I could pick another thing, but if we're going to talk about Best Gore and Love Lies Bleeding, it's this. So Patrick, talk about it, and then I'll just kind of rave about it more myself.
Damon, indeed, the best gore, and we sort of alluded to it earlier, is really the inciting incident of the movie, which is when Jackie confronts JJ for beating on Beth and literally beats his face off, literally beats him to the point that he no longer has a jaw. The people in my theater were gasping. I'm guessing a lot of them are not hardcore Rose Glass fans that know that she's done horror before. This was the true horror element of the movie. This moment where she is just beating on him and he's pleading for his life and he knows he's in danger. He's like, shit, she's attacking me and I can't fend her off. And then when you just hear a couple of crunches of his face against this fucking whatever it is, marble coffee table or whatever, and he turns around and his lower jaw is basically just, it's ground beef. There's not much of it left, and he is just a mess of gore and blood, and that is hands down the best gore in this movie. There's certainly other moments, and I've got them listed, but that one right there takes the cake, and you could hear it. The audience, my audience, was in complete shock.
Yeah, there was a great moment when Jackie shoots Daisy and the blood goes all over Lou, Kristen Stewart's character. That's a good bit of gore. There's a couple other moments, but the one with that and the real nasty like carnage is shown when Lou shows up to save Jackie and she rolls over JJ and his face is just like his head goes one way, his jaw goes the other because he's just like he's broken and just obliterated.
It looks like a shotgun. It looks like a shotgun went to his face.
everyone in my theater, everyone went, oh, and my girlfriend, who has gone to a lot of horror movies with me, she was just like, ugh, like even she was like audibly went, oh God. Me and my sick and twisted head, I was like, fuck yeah, that's cool.
I was the guy in my theater going, hell yeah.
I
Thank
was
you,
like,
Rose, for fucking showing us up.
I was like, there's some horror right there, buddy. You want horror and Love Lies Bleeding? There you go. I was the one like, hell yeah, let's go. So you knew the fucked up. I was the one smiling, and my girlfriend's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. That scene is so great, and that is so nasty. And JJ, and you know, in a way, you're kind of like, yeah, get your comeuppance. You beat on your wife.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, you should have your face beat off.
Yeah, fuck that guy. Yeah. No, nobody was certainly crying for him in that moment. It was just like, yeah, that's what you get.
Yeah, it was incredible, and yeah, when she kills him too. Again, we talk about like this isn't quite horror. When she slams his head into that thing and he's begging for his life, and then the greatest part is when she gets done, she hits him and drops him, and he kind of flops over on the side, and you just see like blood splatter across the front of this coffee table. It literally looks like she took a shotgun and blew his head off because that's how badly she beat this guy to death.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, you and I were the two guys smiling in the theater. There is a great photo, and if you look it up, you go guy smiling in the theater for Alien, because somebody decided to take a photo during the chestburster scene in 1979. While the chestburster's coming out, everyone in the theater is just reeling and screaming, and there's one guy with a big fucking shit-eating grin on his face. And every time something like that happens, I think of us and I think of that guy. I go, yeah, we're like that guy. He's like, hell fucking yeah.
You know the gift that people use from Anger Management, the Adam Sandler movie with
Yes.
Jack Nicholson, where he's got that grin.
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah,
that's us. That's us.
That is totally us.
We are the Jack Nicholson gift where we're just like,
yeah. Oh, fucking love that. That's for the YouTube people. Shout outs to our YouTube fans. We get comments every week now. I love it.
Yeah, that is definitely us in the theater. Everyone else is like, oh, we're like, we're twisted.
How about more of that?
Patrick, introduce this next category. I always love when you inject new categories for fun, and this was okay. I saw Love Lies Bleeding like 3 hours ago, like tonight. If I can, I like to see the movie the same day we record because it's so fresh in my head. This movie, obviously, we're talking about Love Lies Bleeding, but sometimes you inject these categories where you kind of get to stretch out a little further. I love these categories. I racked my brain about this one all day. You said the categories over earlier today. I hadn't seen Love Lies Bleeding, and I was thinking about this category all day, just trying to come up with the perfect answer. Introduce this category because I love it.
Well, Damon, it is set in 1989-ish, somewhere around there, and believe me, around that time, the thrillers of this era, the late 80s, early 90s, I think are genuinely horrific in their own special way. Just like Rose Glass's movie is special in its own way. So I said, what about the best 80s, early 90s thriller that isn't Silence of the Lambs? Because that's easy, right? We could all pick that one. So I had to take that one out of the running because it's too easy of a pick. There's tons of great smaller budget with plenty of good actors in them, weird hardcore psychological thrillers from that era. Damon, what was your favorite 80s, early 90s thriller?
So I'm going to rattle off a couple that didn't make the list only because I got to give credit where credit's due. Because that's why this was so difficult, because I love a good psychological thriller. As you mentioned, I am the psychological thriller guy. Body Double by Brian De Palma. Love that movie. Dressed to Kill. I've mentioned that on this show before. Another Brian De Palma film. Probably my favorite Brian De Palma film is Dressed to Kill. I love that movie as well. Blue Velvet by the great David Lynch, which has one of the most iconic film performances of all time by Dennis Hopper. That movie's incredible. So that was easily on there. Mulholland Drive, another David Lynch film that I thought about putting on here with the great Naomi Watts. That was also on my list. But because this one is a bit of a crime noir and also a bit of an erotic thriller, because you do get some eroticism in here between Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien's character, I went with Paul Verhoeven's Basic Instinct. Basic Instinct is a film that really gets boiled down to Sharon Stone's nudity, because she's naked for a lot of, and there's some really hardcore sex scenes in that movie. And of course, everyone knows the most famous scene where she's in the police station getting questioned. She uncrosses her legs and you see the shot. Everyone knows the shot. It was in The Sopranos. They showed it in The Sopranos, them watching Basic Instinct, and that's what everyone remembers. What people forget, though, is Basic Instinct is actually a pretty damn good psychological thriller when you deal with Michael Douglas's character, the psychological, the serial killer of Sharon Stone's character, Gene Triplehorn's in there, who is another criminally underrated actor of that era. Basic Instinct, while it is a very horny movie, and you can watch it and you're like, damn, like there's a lot of nudity, a lot of sex. It is actually a really good thriller. It is actually a really good psychological thriller. I really enjoy Basic Instinct, so that's my pick.
And that's a formative movie. I mean, that's up there. When you talk about psychological thrillers, it might be one of the biggest and baddest of all time. It really is. And it was just so shockingly intense, right? Like it like almost pornographic sex scenes. I mean, obviously nothing graphic, but like they're fucking, you know what I mean? Like they're going at it. It's pretty intense. But aside from that, if you can put that off to the side, there's a gripping story there, and it's a tension-filled story, and you're always on the verge of going, who's dying next? Like a proper slasher, like genuinely like a proper slasher.
I gotta throw out my favorite line from the whole movie. Hold on, I want to give credit where credit's due to the actor here. Hold on one second here.
All right, fair enough.
Where's the Basic Instinct? The actor is, and I believe he's passed away since then. George Zunza, who plays Gus, his best friend. Yes, he passed away. Oh no, he's still alive. He's still kicking.
Good.
George Zunza is his name. He's been an actor for many, many years, but he plays Gus, the best friend, and the other guy to Michael Douglas's character, Nick Curran. And at one point, Nick, being Michael Douglas's character, is like, I don't know, she did it. And Gus just finally snaps. He's like, which one are we talking about now, Hoss? We know Hazel did it. We know young Roxy did it. Well, what about the other one? Oh, she got that magna cum laude pussy on her. There's done fried up your brain. The magna cum laude pussy on her that fried up your brain. I just love. Gus is the greatest character in that movie. I just love that line, so I had to throw that out there.
The '90s are built different. Like it just was. Like if there wasn't sex in your movie, you were doing it wrong. And then they got the whole other side of it, the intensity of all those movies.
The magna cum laude. That line cracked me up.
Michael Douglas also was famous for just having a bunch of erotic thrillers on his roster in the 80s and 90s. Like the thing was just like, who is not going to have sex with Michael Douglas in a movie? Like it was almost just like that was, it's like today, The Rock, there's going to be an explosion in his movie. Michael Douglas, there's going to be another type of explosion in his movie.
Yeah, he does a lot. What was the one he did with Demi Moore? What was the one he did that one?
Oh, fuck. What's the Demi Moore one? Man, I don't remember that one.
I have to look that up at some point. Yeah, but yeah, that was
also, by the way, my other go-to pick is a Michael Douglas movie. That's Fatal Attraction. That's another. To me, Fatal Attraction is a horror movie. Fatal Attraction taught me as a small child to never cheat on a woman because all hell can break loose. I mean, that's an absolutely terrifying movie, and that's a Michael Douglas movie.
Yeah, Fatal Attraction. Yeah, Glenn Close is terrifying in that film.
Oh my God, what a performance, dude!
She's really, really good. And what is hold on, I gotta look at this. Is gonna bug me. Black Rain is another one where he does a really good job in that one. What is the one I'm thinking of? Disclosure, that's the one. Disclosure is the one with Demi Moore. So
that's right, Disclosure.
Yeah. So all right, what is your late '80s, early '90s psychological thriller that may also be a little horny if we're
Oh, this one's a lot horny. Just truth be told, because most of them are. The 1994 absolute classic, the banger, Color of Night, starring Bruce Willis. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due here. My lovely wife turned me on to this movie. You think you and I like erotic thrillers? You got nothing on her. She watched every erotic thriller that ever came out in the 90s. And she introduced me to Color of Night. She's like, you've never seen Color of Night? It's insane. And I mean, this is a long time ago. This is many years ago. And, but yeah, Color of Night is one of those amazing psychological erotic thrillers. Bruce Willis, is a colorblind psychoanalyst. Like that's his bend in this movie, and he's in part of this like group therapy thing, and of course he falls in love with a woman, and there's this sexual tension, and then there's murder, and on top of all of that, it's a bonkers movie, but it's one of those great psychological thrillers that just can't be beat.
You know what I love about Bruce Willis in that movie? I'm a big Bruce Willis fan. I'm a big Bruce Willis fan. But Bruce Willis a lot of times does get pigeonholed as John McClane from Die Hard because he did become an action star. Now, what I loved about his action star is he wasn't the big muscled up,
Right.
ripped. He wasn't Sylvester Stallone. He wasn't even Patrick Swayze. Like Patrick Swayze wasn't the biggest guy, but he was always very
Ripped
muscled.
up.
Very yeah. Bruce Willis was kind of like the everyman. He never looked like ripped up. Like he wasn't in shape, but he was never like the bodybuilder type. He didn't look like he spent 12 hours a day in a gym. Everyone kind of loved that. But he got so pigeonholed into being the John McClane character that you kind of forgot he actually had some really good acting chops.
Yeah.
Color of Night is a great example of that, where he's not just playing an action hero, and he actually has some real acting to do in that movie. And Color of Night's great. That's a really fun. If you've never seen it, it's not. I don't know if I'd say like everyone knows Basic Instinct because of the one scene, but I don't even know how many people have actually seen Basic Instinct. Color of Night, I feel like, is even more obscure, even though at the time, I do remember when that came out. It was a big movie when it came out in the 90s. But I don't know if a lot of people in 2024 remember Color of Night.
No, yeah, you got to be into psychological thrillers and erotic thrillers from the 90s to know Color of Night. But at the same time,
who is the main woman in that? Why am I not remember who the main woman
Jane
is?
March.
Jane March.
Yeah, Jane March, who was kind of busy in the 90s. She was also in Clash of the Titans in 2010, but I don't think a lot of people watch that either. But no, she was just in a lot of those 80s, 90s movies. And it's just a fucking wild ride, dude. It's one of those movies where and there's a lot of people in it. There's a lot of people that are worth watching in it. Lance Henriksen's in it. Scott Bakula's in it. There's a lot of people in this movie, and it's one of those ones where you're like, what the like, who the fuck came up with this? It's almost like, imagine if you had no sense of genre at all and you went and walked into Love Lies Bleeding. You'd be like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
This is insanity. That's how Color of Night is. That's why I changed it last minute. I was going to do Fatal Attraction, but I was like, no, let me change it to Color of Night, because Color of Night is very much the kind of movie where you watch it and you go, what the fuck? This is crazy. And that's how I feel like someone completely unaware of these genres would walk into Love Lies Bleeding and get Color of Night vibes off of it entirely, because it's just a bonkers movie.
I want to throw out one more, not to like get too far off the subject. Have you seen Sea of Love with Al Pacino? That's another one with Al Pacino and Ellen Barkin, and John Goodman's in it, and Michael Williams in it. Great movie. It's another late 80s erotic thriller starring Al Pacino of all people. And it's incredible. I mean, it's cheesy as hell at points. It's very cheesy as hell. But it's a story about a serial killer who is killing people from, they believe he's finding his victims from personal ads. And so basically Al Pacino's character goes undercover as like a potential suitor, and he's trying to find, they think it's a woman, like a Black Widow. They think it's a woman getting these personal ads. They're finding the men and killing the men. And so Al Pacino goes undercover as basically meeting women, and he meets Ellen Barkin's character, and she's this very strong, kind of intimidating, kind of scary woman, almost like you could see shades of that in Sharon Stone's character in Basic Instinct years later. And he starts falling for her, but he kind of like, it's almost like the, playing with the spider's web. Like, you can kind of tell that, like, she's dangerous. And the twist, the big twist at the end, I won't tell you what it is, but there's a twist at the end. You're like, oh shit. But yeah, that's another good one. Sea of Love is a great movie from I think it's like 88. I want to say 88, 89 around that time. So check out Sea of Love if you haven't seen that one.
There's so many great actors in those late 80s, early 90s psychological and erotic thrillers. Like, it will blow your mind. I mean, we've rifled off so many names in just a short amount of time. They were like all the biggest names of all the biggest movies of the time were in all these thrillers. Like, they did the thrillers to fill the gaps between the big movies. And so it's like, literally, could you imagine right now if just everybody from every major movie you can think of, every Marvel star, everybody, in the meantime, in between time, did dirty, nasty, Skinamax movies with a little bit of a murder plot in them. Like that was just common. And so I couldn't pass up putting this category in there this time.
I love it. I could talk about these all day. That's from my era growing up. And like when you were a kid, like this is before you had the internet. Like you didn't have the internet. You watched Basic Instinct. You watched Color of Night. You watched Sea of Love. You watched Body Double. I remember when I saw Body Double as a kid, and I was like, my God, this is a porn movie. And it wasn't. Like it's just a lot of nudity. But like as a kid, I'm like, holy crap! Like this is just a lot of naked women in this movie. Good movie. It's a good movie. Like I actually
they are
the movie, but just it's a very horny movie.
That's the crazy thing, is that they are good movies. Like these were studio movies. They're made by like Warner Brothers and Universal and Paramount. Like they were studio movies that probably hovered around 20 or 30 million dollars to be made. And they were made with like the best cinematographers and directors and everything. It was just like, how do we lay sex into a murder plot? Like that, and that was just a genre for a good 10 to 15 years. I mean, probably close to almost 20 years of like erotic and psychological thrillers that just never quit, with all the biggest stars in them. Super weird.
Yeah. They should have like like we always talk about the fondness of the video store days, and we always talk about like the horror section. You go in the horror section, look at the covers. There should have been a section in the late 80s, early 90s that just had a section that said these films fuck. And that would just be like all the erotic thrillers would just be in one section.
Color of Night, Basic Instinct, Fatal Attraction. You just throw them all on there.
Yeah. They just have a giant sign over that just says these films fuck. So
let's see. I want to see Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stonebone. Oh, okay. I'll watch this one. By the way, I forget the name. That's an actual movie, by the way.
Yeah, they did it with that right after Basic Instinct. She did that movie Sliver with Billy Baldwin, which is all over the news now because she did some interview talking about Billy Baldwin, and now they're all fighting on the line about it. But Sliver was another one. Like right after Basic Instinct, she did Sliver, which is not a good movie, by the way. It's not nearly as like interesting as Basic Instinct, but that was like she got like basically pigeonholed into the erotic thriller, and so she slid from one right to the other. Unfortunately, Sliver is not good. But
it would blow your mind how well produced those movies are.
Oh yeah.
They're not like, like right now, basically Love Lies Bleeding is a low budget indie that some people will see.
Yeah.
If this was 1989, the actual year takes place in, these would be two major stars, and this would have a red carpet premiere, like full blown, like this, it would make $25 million at the box office. Like it would be a big movie. That's what thrillers used to be. And we're kind of trying to edge back to that, but and no pun intended, we're just trying to get back to those. And, I think it's tough. The whole movie scene is tough anyway right now. So those smaller budget thrillers, the studios don't do them anymore, unfortunately.
We want to get back to the films that fuck, Patrick. Just say it. That's what you
Let's get back to the films that fuck, please.
Next category, remake, sequel, or leave it alone. I feel like we're going to have the same exact answer on this one. This is the category where we take a movie and we basically say, should they remake it? Should they make a sequel of it? Or should they just leave it alone? Patrick, say it because I know the answer and I'm going to probably say the same thing.
Damon, leave it alone. This is Rose Glass's next masterpiece, in my opinion anyway. When I was watching this movie, I was like, where is this exactly going? And then once the inciting incident kicks off, I said, this is something truly special. And Rose Glass, I already saw her as a visionary from St. Maud, but I go, how do you follow that up? As she went in a completely different direction, and boy, does it pay off in a huge way. And I kept mentioning Boogie Nights during this podcast. She has shades of a Paul Thomas Anderson, who he's hit or miss for me. I don't love every movie he makes. But he makes special movies. He makes movies that everybody kind of stops to take notice of. And that was my biggest impression walking away from this movie. I go, Rose Glass is going to be very big. I think she's going to have to be. She has too much ability as a filmmaker. I think she is going to be put in that category of a Paul Thomas Anderson, of a Quentin Tarantino, where they kind of get to do their thing. And it's kind of an event every time they do their thing. And you have to kind of sit up and take notice when they do their thing. Rose Glass is a very, very special filmmaker. Don't touch this. This is an instant classic. This will be the movie that the young kids discover now, in the next few years. And they'll go, I can't believe I watched that movie. I watched it way too young, but oh my God, what a movie that is. That's what this movie, I saw Boogie Nights in the theater and I was like, whoa, holy shit. Talk about an awakening. You were like, whoa, this is intense. Like that's Love Lies Bleeding for a new generation.
Yeah, the answer is leave it alone. Don't mess with this in any way, shape, or form. The only way I'd want to see this film mess with it all is if Rose Glass is like, you know what, let me do a director's cut where I can throw in a few more scenes that I cut out for time's sake or whatever, just
Yeah.
because I would gladly take more of this movie. So, yeah, there's no need for a scene. This isn't like, it's like sequelizing Thelma and Louise. What are you going to take them after they go into fucking Grand Canyon? Like, why? Like, what would be the point? Like, we don't really need to follow up with Harvey Keitel's character after Thelma and Louise are gone. This film ends pretty perfectly, and they're a damaged relationship. They end with Lou getting rid of a body, and they're driving off to the distance of what is going to be their fractured relationship. So yeah, you don't need a sequel. You certainly don't need to remake it. Leave it alone. And again, the only other thing I would say, if you're going to do something different, is if Rose Glass decides like, hey, on the 4K version, I'm going to throw in like 2 other scenes and call it a director's cut. I'd be cool with that. That's her vision, though. Otherwise, do not touch this film.
Don't touch this film. And also, I will be buying this physical copy. You know me, Damon. I don't collect a lot of things, but I've decided now that I'm collecting my favorite movies, my absolute favorites. I'm going to start buying them all. This is on the list. When this 4K comes out, I got to have it.
I'm a big physical media collector. You can see I have my big physical media collection behind me. I've realized recently how important my physical media collection is because a lot of films that I love are not streaming anywhere. I mentioned in our last podcast a movie called Cry Wolf that I have not seen anywhere. I have a DVD copy. I don't think they even made a Blu-ray of it. I have a DVD copy, but I've not seen that movie streamed forever, and I can't find it anywhere. So, like, I have that. There's a lot of movies I have that back there I have, like, physical copies of that I don't see anywhere. So, yeah, I'm a physical. I know not everyone's into it. Everyone wants to be on the cloud and be digital and, less clutter. But for me, like, I want to own physical media because there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't find or see otherwise. So, yeah, I'm all about physical media, so I would highly recommend that as well. Next category, Patrick, can we survive this thriller? This is a little easier category this time because this isn't full on straight on horror. So I guess we're kind of like, what do we lose, Henchman maybe? Because it's a female centric movie, so it's kind of hard to reject ourselves in here.
Hey Damon, hey, we're not going to put labels on nothing, man. Let's get ourselves a little closer to the action. Let's call ourselves Jackie. You and me are 2 super, super buff chicks, and we're now in the web that is Lou's world. If you and me are in Jackie's situation, can we survive this thriller?
I mean, Jackie does, so I guess technically you could, but
what happens to Damon if you're geeked out on roids and you had to bash a dude's face in? Are you gonna make it out of this, or are you gonna absolutely flip your shit?
So this is like the cops are gonna come knocking on my door after I say this. They're like, "Mr. Martin, we need to speak to you." I've always I don't want to sit here and say I've had like fantasies about killing people. I haven't, but I'm saying like I've always had the feeling like under the right circumstances, if someone pushed me to that point, I could defend myself to the point where like I would go to what ring. And I'll be honest, I've not been in many fights in my life. Thankfully, I don't want to be in fights, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, put it out there. Like, I'm not doing it. One of the only fights I can remember having in my entire life was in high school, my senior year of high school. I was dating a girl, and my best friend was a year older than me. We were in a band together, and he had a girlfriend. They had just the worst toxic relationship. They were just always yelling and screaming. They were just the worst. And then they'd have these moments of reprieve where they were just like the loveliest, doviest couple ever. I mean, my girlfriend, his girlfriend had introduced me to my girlfriend. And so we're hanging out in, I want to say it was like our car or a van. He had a band van. That's what it was, his band van where we carried all our equipment. And we're in the car and we're like hanging out, and him and his girlfriend are outside the car arguing, yelling, screaming. Me and my girlfriend in the car. And at first, we're it's high school, so you're kind of like making out, whatever. But then we hear them screaming. We're like getting uncomfortable because they're like full on yelling at each other. And at one point, my friend slapped his girlfriend. I got out of the van. I walked over to him, didn't say a single word. I punched him harder than I've probably punched anyone in my entire life. knocked him down, broke his nose, knocked out 2 of his teeth. He's bleeding all over himself, and he started to get up. Like, he caught himself, settled, and I was a lot bigger than him. He was like 5'9", I'm 6'3", so I fucking hammered him. He started to stumble back to his feet, kind of, almost like a boxer would, kind of stumbling back. And I told him, I was like, stay down, or I'm going to put you down, and you're not going to get up again. And I just stood there over him, shaking, angry. And he just laid down. He literally put his hands down and kind of laid down and just stared at me, because he knew in that moment how badly he fucked up and how bad it was going to go for him if he got up again. I tell that story not to say that like I'm Johnny Badass, but like I don't go to that place.
Yeah.
That made me go to that place. Him smacking his girlfriend made me get out of the van and absolutely hammer my best friend in the face harder than I've ever punched anybody in my entire life, to the point where if he would have gotten up and challenged me, we may not be doing a podcast today. That's how angry I was. Like, I don't know that I would have stopped in that moment. I was so angry that he slapped his girlfriend. I told him, I was like, stay down or you're not getting up again. Literally is what I said to him. I said, stay down or you're not going to get up again. And he knew in that moment. He's like, it was in that moment he knew he fucked. So
that to me tells me that you're kind of put into Jackie's situation, basically.
So bring it full. We're trying to have a fun podcast here. I'm telling you a serious story, but bring it full circle. So in that situation, like that's something I know that sends me into it. Like I do not cater to domestic violence at all.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're going to get me on a hair trigger where I'm going to flip, like in public or something, that would do it. So I would be Jackie. I would go to the house and slam JJ's head into the table and kill him. Now, Jackie survives by the skin of her teeth because Lou's like kind of obsessed with her at that point and wants to get her out. I don't know that I would make it. So, long story short, would I survive this movie? I'm going to say no, because I probably would like just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper, like under Lou Sr.'s thumb, and it probably wouldn't end well for me. Like, because Lou Sr. was going to kill Jackie. Like, that was his plan. He was going to, she was the last loose end he needed to tie up. So his plan was to kill her after he dealt with his daughter. He just didn't get the chance.
Yeah, and I think there's so many little factors in there that don't exactly mirror my life, but I'm in that same boat. I train to fight. I get into fights all the time. I just get in with my friends, and it's all mutual, so it's different. But in a situation like that, no one's going to tolerate. And this is not a good thing to share, but there was a guy on the mat who was being very, very disrespectful, and my coach just gave me a look like, teach the guy a lesson, because he needs to go and we need to let him know he's not welcome anymore. I didn't do anything like completely off color. I just used my trained skills to teach the guy a lesson about you don't treat people that way. And then that guy never came back. So you and I have a similar thought process in that people who deserve a fucking beatdown might just get it. They might just get it. And that's exactly where Jackie's head was at. It was like, I want to prove myself with my own fists, with my own power, and she did it now to an absolutely horrific effect, and she got out by the skin of her teeth. But I'm with you. I don't think I survive, because I'm a dude, and I'll do something stupid, and I'll say something stupid. I'll fucking or Lou Sr. looks at me and goes, "Great, I'm glad you did that." Now, bang. He probably would have just shot me dead and let me roll out on the side of the road. He probably wouldn't have gave a shit about me. So yeah, I don't think either of us are surviving this particular thriller.
Yeah, it's like I said, in theory, like it's really a female-led story. So like we would survive because we're not in this story, but injecting ourselves in here, like I'm fully admitted. Like I said, it takes a lot to pull my trigger in that way. What Jackie did to JJ was the one thing that is, I guarantee you, that would pull my trigger too. I would be like, yep, oh, that's what happened. Okay, well, I'm going to go to his house and it's like, do you remember that? Did you ever watch Roseanne as a kid?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember the episode where Jackie's boyfriend beats her up and Dan walks in?
My favorite. I mean, not my favorite. It sounds weird to say it's my favorite episode, but it's my favorite because John Goodman, this big dude with a heart of gold, comes in and just takes this guy out. Like, you know what I mean?
He's like, is she okay? And he's like, and then you see him grab his jacket and walk off, and he comes back, his hands all busted up, and she's like, what did he say? And he goes, if I remember correctly, ouch, ouch, you're on my head, ouch, ouch.
Yeah, no, it's one of my favorite episodes because I go, he was the protector in that moment. Sometimes people need a little bit of street justice, and
Yeah.
this movie's all about street justice. And so
Yeah.
I absolutely loved that moment in Roseanne.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite episode. Just Dan's like, all right, doesn't say a word, grabs his jacket and leaves. I'm like, yep, that's me right there. I remember seeing Dan in that moment. Like, oh, you beat up your girlfriend? Okay, well, I'll take
Yeah.
this for you. Yeah. So, last category, Patrick. I like that you put the twist on this because again, this isn't a full on horror film. We're openly admitting that.
Yeah.
So instead of "is it scary," I love the name you gave this one. Is it thrilly? I don't even know. I don't think thrilly is actually a word, but
It is now.
is it thrilly? Yes, this film is absolutely thrilly. It is an incredible thriller. It is a great crime noir. It is a psychological thriller. It is an erotic thriller. It checks a lot of boxes, and while it doesn't go full on horror, although again there are some gory moments, and
Yeah.
some people define horror by gore. Some people are just like that's horror to them. There are some pretty horrific moments in this film, so it's 100% a thriller. This is like I'm the psychological thriller guy. This is going on my list of like my favorite psychological thrillers.
It is all types of thrillers very efficiently rolled into one. And it's an instant thriller classic. I mean, come on. What more can I say? Thriller is a part of our genre. I respect the thriller in a big way. And what Rose Glass did here and everybody involved is something super special. This is just one of those ones where I'm like, fuck, dude. I'm going out to buy the physical media, Damon. You know me. Oh, I gotta buy one little slim Blu-ray. Oh, you're killing me. I don't want to put something in my house. I'll put this in my house because it's something that's worth going back to over and over and over again. And Rose Glass knocks it out of the park yet again. Totally thrilly.
And let me throw this out there because there was a film that came out last year that I loved that we were talking about reviewing, but we didn't because it didn't quite fall into the horror category. And now I kind of regret that because we're doing this film. I would actually argue that film is even more horrific than this one, and that's a film called God is a Bullet. Nikolai Coster-Waldau from Game of Thrones, Micah Monroe is in it. It's basically a story about this satanic cult basically breaks into a house, kills a woman and her husband, and kidnaps their daughter. And the daughter belongs to Nicholas Coster-Waldau's character, who is like a small town sheriff. It's his estranged ex-wife and her husband get murdered by this cult, and the daughter gets kidnapped. He goes on a mission to track down this cult to find his daughter. To get in there, though, he has to basically more or less join the cult. He has to basically like become part of this. And so he meets Micah Monroe's character, who used to be in the cult, and she kind of gives him the introduction. And so the whole movie is a revenge thriller mixed with this father desperate to find his daughter before you can imagine what happens to her. I loved it. It didn't get great reviews. It was kind of like middle of the road reviews. It's Nick Cassavetes who did it, the director who did it.
Yeah.
Great. I like Nick Cassavetes a lot. Great film. Very much a thriller. It's like 2.5 hours long. It's a weirdly long movie. It's got Jamie Foxx in it too. Real briefly, he's in it for a little bit. Really good movie, but it's of this kind of film. So we are going out a little bit more on a limb to review Love Lies Bleeding. If you're looking for another film recent of this, not the same, but like thriller, kind of dark thriller, go watch God is a Bullet. I loved that movie last year. It just didn't quite fall enough into the horror category where we didn't review it, but I saw it in the theater and I loved it.
Yeah, I still need to check it out. It's like on the list. It's just I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, so highly recommend it. But Love Lies Bleeding is in theaters right now, so go check it out. Again, not to go back on our whole theater discussion, but if you get a chance to go see it in the theater, do yourself a favor. It's worth your time. If you can't tell, Patrick and I adored this film. I like Saint Maud. I preferred this one. This one was, more in my wheelhouse and went away a little bit from the surrealism of Saint Maud. Now, even if but as a Saint Maud fan, I'd imagine you like both, so...
Yeah, it's great. It's going cool. I'm going to have the Rose Glass collection so far.
Yeah, that sounds like a weird like TV infomercial. Like $39.95, you too can have the Rose Glass collection right here on QVC. Yeah, check it out. It's worth it. Love Lies Bleeding, incredible film. Go see it. It doesn't quite fall into horror, but it's a thriller, and I would highly recommend it. And I assume you would do the same.
Oh yeah.
That is our show for this week, people. We're going to be back next week. We have got a huge string of films coming up in horror films. Now, I want to set the stage here a little bit because next week, technically this week by the time this episode drops, there are 3 films that actually fall into the horror category that we want to review. The new film Immaculate, which stars Sydney Sweeney, which everyone's probably seen the trailer for right now. That's probably one of the most mainstream of the horror films.
Yeah, and buzzy.
And very buzzy. Just debuted at South by Southwest. Very buzzy. Then you've got Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which again doesn't really fall into horror too much, but it is. It's ghosts. It's, it's a sci-fi horror thriller. We reviewed Ghostbusters Afterlife. We feel an obligation to once again do Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Then the third film is Late Night with the Devil, which is more of the indie, eventually going to be on Shudder kind of film, and that is David Dastmalchian's film. You've actually seen it already.
I saw it a year ago.
Yeah, I'm going to see it next weekend. So we have 3 films. So just to kind of set the stage here, we are not going to review all 3 in one episode. That's not fair to do to these movies because they all deserve their own space. So we are going to review Ghostbusters Frozen Empire first because, let's be honest, that is the biggest film next weekend. It's going to be number 1 at the box office. We can all predict that. We are going to do Immaculate, and we will eventually get to Late Night with the Devil. So just to set the stage here, we have a lot of horror films coming next weekend. We are going to get to them all. It's just going to take us a little bit of time to get to them because we want to give proper credit and proper time to each film. We did a couple episodes back in the day where we tried to do multiple films, and it just didn't flow right because we couldn't really dedicate enough time to the film. We like to really, part of what we do on this podcast is like we take a really deep dive on a film, on one film. It's hard to do that when you're like, oh, this film and that film and 3 films, you're trying to compare them, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do 3 films in one episode.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do 3 films in one episode, but we are going to get a couple of weeks of reviews that normally it'd be like out the week after it releases. It might be now 2 weeks or 3 weeks after something releases, but that's just because it's just a packed schedule. And hey, more is more, so that's all good, and we'll get to them all.
Absolutely. If you got questions, comments, or movies you'd like us to review, please hit us up anytime on social media. You can find us on Twitter, X, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, or you can send us emails at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, as we mentioned earlier, we do have a YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on YouTube. Subscribe. It does mean a lot to us, even if you're not on there every day or you don't even watch the episodes and you're just a Spotify user. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It makes a huge difference for us, so we'd really appreciate it. Go search Rewind of the Living Dead on YouTube. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I love hearing from you guys. I know Patrick does as well. Hit us up anytime. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And as always, we want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in each and every week to Rewind of the Living Dead. Next week, I'll just go ahead and say it, is going to be Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, so stay tuned for that episode next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you then.
Peace.